My name is Pearl Giventer, Pearl Richmond Giventer. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska. The date was December the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, 1920. Born on at the old Methodist Hospital. Now what?
I want to hear about your parents.
Okay. About my parents. My dad and mom came from Russia in the early 1900. About 1912, 13, my mom came first, and my dad, who was a year younger, followed her. She was 18 and he was 19. He didn't want to lose her, so he came, and they landed in, it's kind of vague. My parents weren't sure, and I never asked them too much, but it was probably in, they came to St. Louis, where they had family. And then they eventually went to other cities, probably to decide whether they wanted to live in one or the other. One being Waterloo, Iowa. They had family there. My mom did. My dad had family in Omaha. He was, and the cousin that he came to visit was, they had a hardware store on North 24th Street. And my dad kind of went into the hardware business eventually, working for a man by the name of Rosenberg on North 16th Street. My mom became a housewife, and my sister was born, my sister Esther Richmond Gordman was born in 1916. She's 4 years older. And so my dad buckled down right away. He had to start supporting a family eventually. And so we did. They did a real good job. They were wonderful parents. I often say everybody should be blessed as much as I was. They were fantastic. Really, words can't describe the feelings I had for my parents. And it was a good life. And what else can I say?
Were they married here in Omaha?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting story. Since you asked me, my parents were very Orem when they came. My dad had nothing, a lot of ambition. He went through the 4th grade. That's his education. And he became quite a successful person in the business world. One day they were at my cousin's house, the Giller family. The Gillers had 7 boys, and it was a bris for the second to the youngest boy. They had the rabbi, they had the refreshments, and they had the need to help my parents out, and they got married at the house. That was the way, and that was on 16th and Burt Street, across street from the Omaha Potato Market. Do you remember that? Excuse me. Anyway, that was their wedding. It was real. In fact, 50 years later, they had a wedding anniversary party, and Paul was the Giller boy that my parents got married at his bris. Sent my parents a telegram saying he congratulated them, and he sent him a telegram saying that it signed it the Mashimit, because my mom always called him Polly the Mashimit. Is that okay? I don't want to be too rude. But he was a real gem of a kid, and all of the 7 brothers, if anybody knew them, were the most delightful people in the whole world. I used to take my mom over there frequently because she loved them so much, and I loved them too. But they moved away from Omaha. They wound up in Dallas, Texas, and the last one just died about a month ago now. The last one, and his name was Davy. He was 80 years old, and boy, do I miss him now. It's a horror story. He was we used to talk all the time, and I was planning to go to see him here now, in fact, but although the family want me to come, I just don't feel comfortable anymore because he's gone, and I couldn't take it, I don't think. Anyway, what else can I do?
I want to know, what was your mother's maiden name?
Jenny Siegel.
Did she have any brothers or sisters here?
No, not here. She had brothers and sisters in Russia, where she came from, and by the way, that was Shinastra. But I'm not sure if it was my mom that came from Shinastra or my dad. Proskurov is the other city, Proskurov. And I hope I'm saying it good enough, because they didn't talk about it much. They really never. My mom's sister came to visit her years ago, and my mom wanted her to stay because she was from Russia, and she loved Russia so much she said she would never stay in the United States. She stayed for about a month or so, and then she went back, and then she passed away later on. And my mom had a brother that lived in Israel, Shlomo, and he came to visit us once years ago, before my aunt, and he has since passed. He died. My mom lived to be 96. My dad, unfortunately, lived to be 82. Cancer.
Did your dad have brothers or sisters?
Yes, he did. I never knew any of them, and I never got to meet there was only one cousin that came here from Russia, and he went to Chicago. They sent him from Russia to check up the bridges in the United States, because that was his specialty. And then he went back to Russia with the designs and whatever he could manage, and evidently they were going to be building bridges in Russia. This was back in probably the 20s. I only remember it as a story because I was too young at that point. And I remember them talking about it. But he only went to Chicago, studied the bridges, and went back. And
Now I want to hear a little bit about your father. You mentioned that at first he started in the hardware business.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell me what else he did in his business life.
Oh, okay. I can tell you one thing that's kind of interesting about my dad. He went to work first in the packing house in South Omaha, I guess. And they wanted him to be a tinsmith. Well, evidently he flunked tinsmithing, and so they let him go. And that's when he went to work for the hardware store business, whatever. And then he gradually got into clothing at that time. And he probably, the year is vague, but it was probably after my sister was born. So that would be she was born in 1916, so he probably by 1917, 18, who knows when, he started he sold jewelry and clothing in the store. I remember it well because when we used to get, and shoes. That was a big item with him, shoes. He was between 16th and Chicago and 16th and Cass. On the corner was Dave Dennenberg, the Dennenberg kids' father, and on the across the alley from us was in the block was the Glicken family. Had a clothing business also, and Friedman's had a grocery store there. The rest of them, and there was the little hardware store, Rosenberg or Rosenblatt. Can't remember the name for sure. But anyway, that's where my dad first started to work. That's why he got this. Skip the biggest one. Greenbaum had a grocery store next door to our store. So I was real friendly with, and Evelyn Greenbaum still lives in Los Angeles, and she had a brother, Sidney. I don't know what happened to him. And they had, the relations they had was the Bernsteins, and the Bernsteins had a business down on, these are all business people, mind you. They had and they were all little stores. Bernsteins were down between California and Burt. And so was Shafton. Does that ring a bell? And let's see, Lucille Batt, her folks had a clothing store down near us too. And then there was a little park theater which we attended frequently. Took a whole nickel to get in. And it was not kind of nice because it was way before TV sets came around, so we had entertainment. Anyway, I have some pictures I can show you. That I don't have them with me though, however. Anyway, I guess what else can we talk about?
What do you remember about that original clothing store?
Oh,
Were you old enough to work there?
I did. Yes, in fact, my sister said, Esther, she used to say to me that that she started to work there when she was 9 years old. And I said, I don't think so, Esther. She said, yes, I did. In fact, we had a big argument. She said, when later years, she said, we used to sell chambray shirts for 49 cents a shirt. And I said, no, we didn't. We sold them for 39 cents a shirt. They were made in the prison here, and that's why they could sell them that cheap, because they had to furnish the fabric and have them. But that was the cost of shirts in those days. How lucky can you get now? We're paying, the guys are paying $30 and $40 and $50 for a good chambray, whatever. Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I worked there. I could hardly reach the cash register. I think my dad had a stool there so we could walk up the stool and ring up the register. But we did wait on the customers, and my dad played chess mostly. He had made a table, and he faced it towards the store, and he sat in the back, and he used to play with some really nice guys. There was a Mr. Radnowski. Does that ring a bell? Mr. Kipnis. Mr. Let's see, Radnowski. I wish I could think of the names now. All of a sudden I'm a blank. But they would come in each day. Oh, and a couple professors from Creighton University used to come in and play with my dad. And then later on, when my dad finally retired, I used to drive my dad, when he couldn't drive anymore, over to their houses. And one of the professors happened to live close to where we live now, and I took him over there. I don't remember how I got him home, but he might have walked because it wasn't that far.
What were some of the other prices? Do you remember any of the other clothing prices?
No, but those shirts stood out in my mind because we argued about it through the years. Not really, but it was kind of neat. And we argued about the age of us. I said I was 10 years old when I started to work there. She said she was 9. We worked there for all through high school. I did.
You mentioned earlier, Pearl, about your dad being in the automobile business.
Okay, you were asking me about the car business. My dad started the clothing store, and he was working in it, and he had everything going real pretty good. And then one day, some man came into the store, and he said to my dad, he was a customer. He bought overalls. He worked at the railroad. And he said to my dad, he said, Sam, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, he has a big family. He had 4 kids, and his wife and father-in-law, I think, was living with him. And he didn't have any income coming in. And the grocery, who are these little grocery stores on every corner here, there was no big competition. Well, they wouldn't let him have anything on credit anymore because he didn't have any job. So my dad said, well, how much do you need? How much do you owe the grocer, Fred? He said, I owe him $40. Now, nobody now can appreciate what $40 was in those days. But when you could buy a brand new car for $400 or $500 in those same days, $40 was a lot of money. And my dad said, Fred, here's $40, pay the grocer. And Fred said to him, his name was Fred King, he said to my dad, he says, Sam, if I could get a hold of $50, I could buy a car that needs some repair work, and I could sell it. We could make some money. And my dad said, I'll give you the money, Fred. He gave him the $50, and a couple days later, Fred came back, and he said to my dad, here's your $50, Fred, and Sam, and here's another $50 for the profit on the car. And he kept $50 for himself, for his work and stuff. So my dad, he was kind of in awe of it, and then he said, well, he needed to do the same thing if he wanted to make some more money. He could buy 4 cars for $500, or 5 cars, I don't remember for sure which. And he said I could fix them and we could make some money. And then my dad and he became partners in the automobile business, and they really did real well. Now, my dad was able to work with Fred and also run the clothing business at the same time, but eventually, and at this time, my sister was going with this young man, and they got married, and my dad gave Dan Gordman half of his business, and my dad just would come in all the time, and when he had time, and help in whenever he could. And Fred, the business wasn't that much, and he would work in the store, and they did real well. And eventually, I don't know if you know it now, there's 63 stores now in 15 states, and one of my nephews, great nephew, runs the whole operation, and they're doing quite well, I guess. But it was kind of hard for a while, but when Dan took over the running of it, it was a load off my dad's mind pretty much, and he expanded. Oh, and then he became he was approached by a car agency, and they asked him if he'd be interested in being in a car dealer of new cars. And he took on Hudson Terraplane, and I learned to drive on a Terraplane. Did you ever drive? Had the letter H. Do you remember that? It was a neat car, but they're not to be found much anymore. Anyway, that's the story of my dad's career there. I'm trying to think what else. They really, the stores got real big. The car lot was massive. He used to have 400 and 500 cars at a time on the car lot. He did a land office business. Plus, he did it a little differently than most. Everything was trust, and he didn't have any problems. And if they had car trouble, they'd bring the car in, and his mechanics would fix it and the car and charge them whatever it cost, and it would add a little to it probably on the bill to carry it, because they never paid, nobody ever paid for anything in full in those days, because everything was on credit, wasn't it? I'm the only one, I guess, that pays cash for anything. What else do you do?
As you grew up, Pearl, did you work in the store a lot
Oh, yeah. I used to work.
during high school and so on?
Oh, yeah. I came from school to the store. Yeah, I worked, I went to Central from 35 to 39, and I worked in the store all those years. And then when Dan kind of came towards the end of that, why, in the summertime we were there always, but in the wintertime when school was on, we'd come after school. Then I started working by then, my dad gave me a car to drive, and he said, "This is not your car, this is your mother's car. You take her wherever she wants to go." So that was good. At least I had, it was a lot of fellows I knew said, "You're the only girl in Omaha that has a car of her own." And I never let them on to think I didn't have a car of my own. But it was kind of easy. Better, for me too, because then I went to Omaha University, and I was able to drive out there, and Bob Perlman, for one, said, "You were stuck up." And I said, "I was?" He says, "Yeah, you used to drive right by me, and you never stopped to see if I wanted to go." I said, "I didn't know you then. Why would I stop and see?"
What was a life like in your house, just growing up?
Actually, it was kind of unusual because my dad was always pretty much workaholic, and my mom was she didn't drive, so she was, no women drove in those days, that era. And she just kept a meticulously clean house, and she cooked all the time, and it was wonderful. But I couldn't follow in her footsteps, because when I came along, and my husband didn't even suggest it, but I saw what he was doing in the store when we got married. And so I decided I like to work more than I like housework. So and to this day, that's true. I'd rather do that than, and like you say, what was it like in the house? It was, a normal household. We had a nice house. We lived at 30th and Nicholas, and I went to Webster School, and my dad would take us to school every morning. When I went to high school, he would drop us off, and then I would walk down to the store to work in the store and I'd either wait for my dad to go home, or sometimes I would go home with Mr. Trediak. Do you remember Joe Trediak? He went home at 6 o'clock, and he lived right behind us. He was on Lincoln Boulevard, and our house was on Nicholas, right at the bottom of the hill. What else can I tell you?
Was your family very religious?
Not really. My mom maintained but they really didn't push it. My dad was very modern. He used to eat, most real religious people wouldn't eat in a restaurant, but my dad just would go from the car lot, or from the, that started with the car lot that he mostly went to eat at. He liked to eat at Brandeis Store. They had a cafeteria. Do you remember? Do you remember that too? That's good. And he liked to eat there, and he didn't eat, I don't know what he ate. Fact of the matter is, when I got into business, my dad used to stop by we were located, first we were on 19th and Cummings, and then lightning struck that building, and we lost our warehouse in that situation. And then he went out one day, my husband, and bought this building on 15th and California, a 4-story building, half block there. And he came back and he said, that he had bought this building. I said, "What'd you do that for?" Because I was never that ambitious to go forward that much. He was always, I have to give him credit. I gave him a lot of credit for, he was the inspiration of the business. I don't know if you knew what we did. Do you? We bought from the railroads and the trucking companies, over and short merchandise, damaged and so forth, and we had repairmen that repaired what needed to be, and we sold it. And we really did, it was real good, and eventually we got into carpeting, and then that was a different story. We really got into it big time. And then by then, my children were around, and my son had come back from the service, and he wanted to go to California. He just wanted to, so he drove to California, and he took one of our cousins that was here from Israel to California with him, and my mom didn't want that cousin to go to California, and she told him, he said, this is the United States, I'm 21, and I'm going. And it's a free country, he said. And then he went back to Israel after his trip to Los Angeles, or whatever, California, Arizona. He had family in Arizona that he wanted to see. It was kind of fun. And my son was going, and he took him there. Paul went to UCLA at that point. Before he went, and then later, after the service, then he went to, after college, he went to the service.
Pearl, you mentioned that you went to UNO. Did you go? How long did you go there?
Well, I went there for about 2.5 years, and one day I bumped into a girlfriend of mine from Central High School that I'd graduated with, and she said to me, "Pearl, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to University of Omaha." It was on the hill on Dodge Street, and she said, "Oh, you can't do that." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "We need you." And I said, "What do you mean you need me?" She said, "Well, she works for Mutual, and she's a kind of a recruiter, I guess." Her name was Betty Brown, and she asked me to go in and fill out an application. And she made me promise her I would do it. So I went down to do it just as a lark, I guess. And I filled out the application, and when I came home from filling out the application, my mom said, "There's a call for you from Betty Brown from the Mutual of Omaha." So I called her back. She said, "Can you come in to work tomorrow?" So I went in. I worked in the life accounting department there for, I probably did wrong not to finish college, but I always considered that I went through college and got my doctorate there and was paid to go because it was fun. At that time, Mutual wasn't hiring hardly any Jewish at all. I was probably this. You know what? Mel Tatelman, Dr. His sister was working there. And she was about the only Jewish girl that I knew of that was working there. They were very, is it okay to say, tough on that? But I worked there for about 3.5 years. Something like that, I don't remember. And then I applied for a job in Washington, D.C., took a test, passed it. And on my way to Washington, I stopped in New York City. When I was in New York City, I was visiting cousins of mine that had left Omaha years before, and we were not in touch like today, with the telephone and writing letters was, their name was Chirashni. Nobody in the world, they were from Omaha, and they had moved to New York, and my cousin was working in a plant, making something for the war, and so he worked during the night, and he slept during the day, and I was staying with him, and so we couldn't hardly talk or anything because he was sleeping always. So I got an apartment there, and I got a job, and I went to work for Macy's then. And I worked there for about 3 months, and then my dad, called me up and he said, you got to come home. Dan's going into the service, and you're going to be running the store. So, and I was 24 then. And I said, okay. So in those days when your parents told you to come home, you came home. You didn't ask any questions. He didn't ask me. He said, you're coming home. And I did. So, but Dan didn't have to go to the service. He had 2 babies by then. So then I just stayed. I worked at my dad's car lot. That's when I started to work for my dad. And it was fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. Then I met Ned. How did I meet Ned? Oh, yeah. I went to some kind of a club meeting from Temple, Israel. And no, that isn't exactly it. I met him because when I was going to have this Temple Israel, I was going to have the meeting at my house. And I'd come back from New York at that time. And my mom didn't have hardly any, she didn't furnish the house with anything artistic. And I wanted to get some pictures and stuff. So I said, I heard that there's this company called H&G Brokerage. So I said, let's go down there and see what they've got. And we went down there to buy some pictures, and I wanted a mirror, and I wanted some, whatever I saw. So when I was there, Mr. Giventer, who was the G of the H&G, and H was Himmelstein, Lorraine Reese Himmelstein. Her father was partners with my soon-to-be deceased now, father-in-law, Sam Giventer. Anyway, he was in the store. He had just come back from the service. He had served almost 5 years, which I have something I want to show you. Anyway, so he came back, and I met him at that point. And then when I went home that night, I was a member of the Hadass, and we were having a hay rack party. So I had this friend that she wasn't going to go unless she had a date. I don't remember how that was. She wanted to go to the hay rack party, but she wouldn't go. I said to her, I met a real nice fellow today. If I get him to take you or to go with you, would you pay your dues? $2. She wouldn't pay her dues. I said, would you pay your dues? And she said, yeah, she would. So that was my beginning of my selling career. So I called up this fellow that I met, Ned, and I said, we're having a hay rack party, and we'd like you to come, and you would be, the guest of such and such. And he said, love to come, but on Saturday night, which was the night it was going to be following Saturday night, he said we stay open till 11 o'clock. All the stores did that in those days, real late on Saturday night. So I think that's the time. Maybe it was 10 o'clock. But anyway, he couldn't go to the hay rack party. So I said, okay. He said, but would you be willing to go out with me if I... And I said, well, I suppose. He was very good, very handsome. So I went out with him, and that was the end of that story.
What I want to know
Yes?
is what about this girl that was going to pay the $2? Did you ever get that?
That's a good question. In fact, I was friends with them. That was the white girl. Remember they had the white grocery stores? Did you know that family? Who did you know? There was a Zelda, and Zelda died about a month ago. And I had been talking to her. I just located her recently, and I was talking to her in New York. And very sad because she was kind of strange, but I liked her. She was fun. And it was her sister that we were trying to fix up. her older sister, whose name was Lee, L-E-E. They were family. They're related to the other white that comes here now, from Washington, D.C. And I don't know if he knew about that. I should get in touch with him. Whatever. It's too bad. Everybody's dying, they say. It's a bad habit. Anyway, yes.
What year did you and Ned get married?
It was in 1946. The beginning of was in the beginning of the year.
When did your business career begin?
Shortly thereafter. When we got married, he decided that he would want to do. Well, his dad was in that kind of business. That's the same thing. But his dad was down on 16th Street, 16th. And we were on Cummings, 20th and Cummings, 19th and Cummings. We actually were doing sort of the same thing as his dad, but he was helping his dad out always, which was fine. What were you asking me? I'm trying to think.
When did you become the business lady?
Well, about a year after we were married, a little less than a year, in fact. Paul was born 9 months practically, and so he started this business. Before that, how he started the business was kind of interesting. It doesn't matter, but I decided I wanted to see what was going on, so I got a babysitter and I went down to see what was. Oh, my sister would take care of it. My sister and I lived 1 block apart at that time. We bought a house right 1 block from her. And then I started working, or got someone to come in and take care of Paul as a baby. And real nice lady. She was actually, we brought Paul to her house every day. And then we would go open the store. It was early in the morning. Real early. I don't know how I did it. Hate getting up early. Anyway, so I guess that's about it. I got into it then, and I pushed him a little bit. He always said to me, if it hadn't been for me, we wouldn't have made it. And I said, oh, sure. But he was really the backbone of it, too. He had all the good ideas, and then when I got real involved, we had one situation that was very fascinating that in the business. We had a neighbor who was vice president of a big corporation that manufactured water heaters throughout the whole United States. They made them for Montgomery Ward, Sears Roebuck, Gamble stores. They made them for anybody that wanted their name on it, and they put your name on it. In other words, if it was Sears, it was one. They labeled them for them, and it became quite a thing. But what happened is they wanted to change their way of doing business. They had drop-off points. One was in Kansas City, one was in Des Moines, one was in Denver, and other small towns and I'm not sure if they had one at that time in Omaha or not, but they didn't sell enough volume to keep all the operation the way it was, so they decided not to do that anymore. And if a dealer wanted to have some heaters, the dealer could contact them and buy them that way. Well, then they were stumped. They had all these heaters all over the Midwest that were building up inventory, and they weren't moving that fast. They sold them eventually, but not that fast. Okay, so this guy called me up, and I answered the phone, and he said, Pearl, no, I think Ned, I gave him the phone, and he said, his house was right behind our house on where we're at now. I've been in that house 53 years. And he was a real nice guy, and he liked us because he liked the operation and stuff. He used to come and visit us a lot. But he was also a neighbor, but he sold the water heaters, distributed them to different dealers around the country. So he said, I've got a deal for you. If you want to buy them, I'll sell you the water heaters, $1 on the gallon, 40-gallon heater, $40. Now they cost more than that. But he said, if you take them all, you can have them that way. They were gas, electric, big, small, massive, 100-gallon size. And we had to release, my husband said, absolutely not. And I said, Ned, that's a fantastic deal. We can sell them. We can do it. I'll be right there with you. He said, nope, no way in hell. He was adamant. And then I said, come on, we'll do it. So I talked him into it finally, and he did. And it was, we had to lease a big building across the street from our warehouse. And we sold them like hotcakes. It was amazing how much we sold. And they were all good, you know, there was nothing wrong with them. It was amazing. It was in the thousands. They came from all over. They brought them in on semis. Anyway, it was fun. I guess I was really ambitious, or maybe dumb. I don't know. But we did. We sold them, and I went and bought a heater just this past week. The cheapest heater that I could find was a little over $300 for a 40-gallon that we used to sell. We bought them for $40. We sold them for $69, $79 at the most. They were selling around town for a little more than that, but we were selling them so close because we needed to get rid of them. And it was a real fun thing to do, but I couldn't believe how high they are. The only reason I went to to Lowe's to get it, I have stock in Lowe's. I like to patronize them because I figure I'm getting part of the kickback, at least a half a penny, at least. Anyway.
How long were you in the business in all?
About 55 years in that, but then I worked in the business world with my dad's store since I was, maybe 10, 11 years old till now. Couple of years. But it's fun. I enjoyed it.
Pearl, how many children do you have?
3. I have, my son is 60 right now. Let's see, today is what day? 21? On the 23rd, he'll be 61 of this month. And Marlis, and then I have another daughter, Cindy. And in the closing, I suppose that's what I should be doing. I want to say to my children that I love you each and every one of you, down to the newborn baby that we have, very, very much. And I hope that you get to see this sometime, and you'll know that I worked real hard to do this afternoon, and so enjoy. But I do want you to know how much I love you, and I really miss you more than you can imagine, because nobody is willing to live in wonderful Omaha, Nebraska.